What I want to do today is tell you a story. It's a story about a football team. Now, I've seen parts of the story covered here and there before, but I haven't really seen anyone bring it together into a cohesive, actual narrative with a beginning, middle, and end, so I've decided to do that. Because at the end of the day, when you take a look at the overall rise and fall of the University of Oregon football program, it tells a very interesting story. Some parts comedy, some parts almost a Shakespearean tragedy, depending on which side you're on. Now, the story really starts in the 90s with Phil Knight, co-founder and former CEO of Nike Incorporated, listed by Forbes as the 28th richest man in the world. Phil was an alumni of the University of Oregon and has been dubbed by many the most powerful booster in America. He has poured hundreds of millions of dollars into the university, giving them new buildings, new facilities, cushy locker rooms, and every last flashy toy and gadget a 21st century American sports team could possibly want. The motivation is pretty clear. Phil Knight wants national relevance for his alma mater. Phil wants the biggest honor of them all, the national championship. At this point in time, though, it's little more than a pipe dream. During Phil's days at the University of Oregon, the school's football teams were and always have been nobodies. The most obvious way Knight could fix that now was by investing a chunk of his personal fortune into the program. And Phil was not alone in wanting national relevance. Many of the fans of the team felt a bit of a chip on their shoulder, especially being in the Pacific Northwest, where not much attention is attracted from the college football world, or at least at the time. In an attempt to garner outside attention, Phil and the university bankrolled a billboard in Times Square in 2001, promoting their quarterback at the time, Joey Harrington, for the Heisman Trophy. He didn't win. One of the most obvious signs of Phil's influence was the new uniforms being provided by Nike. They started out as simple variations of Oregon's green and yellow color scheme, but as the years went on, and especially recently, Nike seemed to outdo themselves, churning out designs to provide the team with new uniforms on a weekly basis. The team became a walking fashion show, with uniforms ranging from slightly garish with chrome helmets, neon socks, and sometimes even glitter, to downright bizarre, like dressing as an actual duck, or as the state flag. Another early sign of Phil's influence was the introduction of Robo-Duck, Nike's attempt at getting UO their own licensed mascot. They were using a Donald Duck at the time. I think the mascot's now known as Puddles to prevent legal action from Disney. I'm not real clear on that. Anyway, Robo-Duck was not well received and soon disappeared. Now, Phil's initial attempts at bringing the team up to a serious contender status coincided with Mike Bellotti's tenure as coach. Bellotti is still the winningest coach in school history, but that's largely due to his lengthy tenure and coaching average to mediocre teams in comparison to UO teams of the past, which were much worse than mediocre, let's just say that. When he retired in 2009, he passed the mantle of the coaching position to his offensive coordinator, a man named Chip Kelly. Almost immediately, Chip began implementing a new culture in Eugene. He would shut the media out of the facilities, conduct closed-door practices, and recruit players with promises of stardom and success. Little did the sports media at the time know he had a plan up his sleeve. September 3rd, 2009, Chip Kelly's first game. It was at Boise State and was a loss. But even worse than the loss was what happened afterwards.
Oregon players fighting amongst themselves, too. Blunt nailing Hout. That is unconscionable, reprehensible behavior. There's no excuse. No excuse for that.
And Mark, think about, we started this football game with a symbolic handshake to start the college football season on good sportsmanship. That is unbelievable right there.
It would come as no surprise if LeGarrette Blunt isn't sanctioned for the next game or ensuing games, and he is still almost out of control right now.
After losing the opener and getting bad press from LeGarrette Blunt's sucker punch, Chip responded by reading to the team out loud from a children's book entitled Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day. Anyway, things improved after that first week. It was followed up with 2 wins against teams that weren't very good, and as in-conference games started, Chip's top-secret, tightly guarded new system finally went into effect. and they reeled off an impressive series of lopsided victories. But there was more to these wins than simple athletic superiority. Now, let me preface this by saying I am not an expert on football strategy. I'm barely even qualified to watch it on TV. So what I'm about to explain in regards to Kelly's system is really just my own personal take on it, and I'm some nobody who watches this stuff for fun, so feel free to leave angry comments or whatever. That being said, I'm going to try to explain my point of view on this in like the simplest way that I can. Okay. Sports journalists love getting into the day-by-day, nitty-gritty stuff that they rarely step back and look at the big picture. It's all about game day strategy and reviewing the film from last week and player rankings and stats and all that, and I think Oregon's lopsided victories boiled down to something much simpler. Chip Kelly exploited an aspect of football that most others overlooked, namely that teams don't really start playing to win until the second half when they have a pretty good idea of what they're up against. Chip ran the first half like it was the fourth quarter, and poured all of the playmaking and energy into it to psych out the other team. If you see a 30-0 score in the first quarter, you're likely to assume that they're going to be that good in all four, and you'll probably mentally give up in the second half, subconsciously, but yeah. This means the Ducks can now score without even trying or even being all that good. In fact, you would often see Oregon put in their second and third stringers on the field during the second halves of games, but this wasn't just because they were winning in a blowout, it was because they planned for the starters to only play in the first half. They were condensing an entire football game down to one half, and letting their backups take over in the second when the game was pretty much mentally won. Chip Kelly was less of a typical football coach and more of a track coach. Talent, skill, discipline, while all that is useful, none of it really mattered under the Kelly system. Not that much anyway. It was speed, and only speed, that was the key. To an outsider, it's crazy to expect a team to put up an entire game's worth of points in one half. This caught teams so unprepared that an opponent playing football so fast, so early in the game, was fairly new to the Pac-12 conference. There's no Alabamas or Clemsons in the area. No teams that could keep up with them in the first half remained unfazed by their early speed and then outplayed them in the second. What their opponents didn't realize during the Kelly years was the reality of an old saying, a candle that burns twice as bright lasts half as long. Looking at the games that UO did lose at this time revealed a pattern. If you kept pace with them in the first half and stayed competitive in the second, they would completely fall apart. They often had little to no game plan in the second half when they needed one. It seemed they could only reliably win if it was a blowout. It was a one-trick pony, but a very effective one-trick pony. The Ducks only lost one more game in the 2009 regular season to the physically superior Stanford. They then lost the Rose Bowl to Ohio State. The common trend between these two opponents was that they were able to pace them in the first and compete in the second. Alright, that's enough of my theory. Off-season that year was mired in controversy. Among the players caught up in criminal behavior was Michael James, a running back who was found guilty of physically harassing his girlfriend, and Jeremiah Masoli, the quarterback, who was suspended for the season after being caught stealing from a fraternity house, driving with a suspended license, and being caught in possession of marijuana. Despite the disciplinary problems behind the scenes, Kelly's system was firing on all cylinders. 2010 was their best season. They were the hot new team, riding high on top of the charts. They went 12-0 regular season that year and were briefly ranked number 1 midseason after Ohio State and Alabama lost in consecutive weeks. Throughout the games, Chip would often yell at players returning to the sidelines after scoring, upset that they didn't do it fast enough. Winning, after all, depended on the speed of the system, not necessarily the talent of the athletes. Kelly would also put emphasis on not viewing each opponent as a unique team. It only interrupted the flow of his strategy. And that year, Phil Knight's ultimate dream was so close he could touch it. Finally, the Ducks were in the national title game, squaring off against Auburn. Unfortunately for Phil, Oregon could not pull out a victory against a team who could pace them in the first half and keep the game close in the second. The loss stung, but Phil Knight knew this was not the end of the road for his program. He'd made sure of it. With the amount of money he'd invested and the genius system of Chip Kelly, he was sure they would return again soon. 2011 yielded similar results to the previous season, with Oregon going 12-2, the wins all being remarkably lopsided. The losses came, predictably, to the teams that had the strength and depth to continue fighting in the second half. LSU beat them by 13, and USC won by 3 points, proving again, close games are UO's Achilles heel. Postseason luck was finally on Oregon's side in the Rose Bowl, however. because even though Wisconsin kept the game close, their quarterback, Russell Wilson, struggled with time management in the fourth quarter and made a number of mistakes, the costliest coming when he took too long to spike the football. The Ducks managed to escape with a Rose Bowl win, their first since 1970. It would do little to make up for the missed chance at winning the national championship, and during the next few years, pressure would come from top governors and Phil to get the team back into the big one. Soon after the Rose Bowl in early 2012, the program came under investigation by the NCAA for recruiting violations, after it was revealed that Kelly's program had paid Texas talent scout Willie Lyles to influence student athletes as a third party, a practice that is against NCAA guidelines. Even though a ban from attending bowl games was taken off the table by UO during the investigation, Kelly decided to get out of town in 2013. Like Bellotti before him, Chip passed the torch to his second-in-command, Mark Helfrich. Helfrich's first year as head coach was about as successful as the first year could be. He was coaching the team in autopilot mode, continuing Chip's system without altering a single piece. His quarterback, Marcus Mariota, was a Heisman frontrunner, and the only two games they lost were to Arizona and Stanford, programs with more strength and depth than the Ducks had. A funny moment came in the middle of the season when, after beating Washington State in one game, Nick Aliotti, Oregon's defensive coordinator, gave a press conference where he voiced his grievances about the game. He was apparently quite upset that Washington kept trying to pass the ball in the fourth quarter.
I will say I better watch myself. I'm kind of stunned by the fact that he would keep his starting quarterback and crew in there and still be throwing the ball with 20 seconds left. But he did. They want stats. They got stats. But we got the most important stat, and that's the W. And so we're happy with that.
Like I said, I was very pleased with the way we came out in the third quarter. I thought the third quarter we took over the game both offensively and defensively, and for most of the fourth quarter. And then again, I'm repeating myself, but at the end, he's still throwing when most guys would probably just try to end the game and go home. I know I took a little bit of heat for that, and I'm trying to smile and enjoy the win because, I'm a competitor. I is a bad choice of words. I'm pissed off that they scored those last two touchdowns. I know you can't print pissed off. And I know I'm not a diplomat, and I don't really care if I'm a diplomat. I really don't. All I care about is winning games and that the kids get better and we play hard. And I thought we did that in the second half. But that's total bull that he threw the ball at the end of the game like he did. And you could print that and you could send it to him and he could comment too. I think it's low class, and it was bull to throw the ball when the game's completely over.
This statement rubbed many the wrong way. It seemed he was angry that Washington would dare continue to try and compete when they were losing in a rout. This was further indicative of the attitude surrounding the Chip Kelly system. UO expected everyone to just lay down and accept their loss in the second half. The following year's events should have been enough to keep Helfrich on staff until he was old and gray, because much to the delight of Phil Knight and his fellow alumni, Mariota finally brought a Heisman Trophy to Eugene, and to top it off, the Ducks returned to the national championship, but predictably lost to Ohio State. As it turned out, the Heisman-winning Marcus Mariota was a band-aid on a problem no one really wanted to acknowledge on the team. After Marcus, UO had zero depth at the quarterback position. Once Mariota left in the offseason for the NFL, Helfrich was faced with an offseason crisis, and resolved it by luring in senior quarterbacks from other programs. This quick-fix mentality showed its problems during the very first game of the season, when the new quarterback, Vernon Adams, broke his thumb and sat out 5 games. However, Oregon's plug-and-play system was never truly affected very much by the comings and goings of injured players. As long as Chip's strategy was employed, almost anyone could play at any position at UO, as long as they did it fast. Mariota, meanwhile, would go on to meet with mixed results in the NFL, where his first several years would be plagued with injuries. He's currently the quarterback for the Titans. The Ducks went 9-3 in the regular season during 2015, which would be considered a good record for most any other team, but was disappointing to the boosters who expected, at long last, a victorious trip to the national title. Instead, it earned them a spot in the Alamo Bowl against TCU, although the general feeling amongst the university community was seemingly now that This game was almost beneath them a little bit. After all, this was an elite program now. Oregon marched into the Alamo Bowl playing TCU as they did every other team, pouring all of their energy and playmaking into the first half, racking up an insurmountable 31-0 lead. It is rare that you can point to the exact moment that the fate of an entire team can change. Normally, it can take years to build up a program and then years for it to fade back into obscurity. But for the Oregon Ducks, all it took was a single halftime. TCU's quarterback that day was one Bram Kohlhausen, a walk-on and a fifth-year senior who was starting his first and only college game as a result of a fluke. The regular quarterback, Trevon Boykin, had been involved in a bar fight on New Year's Eve 2 days prior and was suspended from the team. Bram Kohlhausen was plugged in as a last resort and was not expected to win. However, in a series of events straight out of a movie, Kohlhausen ran roughshod over the Duck defense in the second half to lead the team to a 31-point comeback win in triple overtime.
Touchdown! Another must-get. They need 8 to keep the game going. At low snap, Lockheed pressured, stepping up. Lockheed throws, incomplete!
The win tied the record for the largest comeback in college bowl game history. For outsiders, it looked like the impossible had just happened. For those who knew the Duck system, however, it was unsurprising to see them crumble like wet cardboard when Kohlhausen, who had nothing to lose, and coach Gary Patterson made a decision to come out firing in the second half. Chip Kelly had constructed a very tall, very impressive house of cards, but that one half of football was like removing a card from the bottom of the house. As the 2016 season started, it became obvious that other teams in the Pac-12 had started catching on and emulating the Ducks system. Nothing had changed about the Ducks themselves. Everyone else just inevitably caught up. The only question was why this hadn't happened sooner. Oregon had not built a solid foundation of skills training, character development, or long-term fundamentals, the things that are vital to any legacy athletic program worth its salt. They had fancy facilities and a shortcut that worked, and that's all they needed, until it stopped working. Helfrich had no backup plans. Things were unraveling around him as he could only stand by and watch. Chip's system was broken, and he couldn't fix it. No one could. The mounting losses created frustration. Since they'd been doing the same thing they always had, it just wasn't working anymore. The negative feedback loop that resulted only drove the team further into the dirt. Defense had never been that good, and sometimes was downright awful, and was displayed in the second half of the Alamo Bowl, but it didn't need to be good under Kelly's system. It wasn't even an afterthought to Kelly, it was the afterthought to an afterthought. But now, when the offense could no longer work that high-flying magic, the defense was sorely missed. If Chip Kelly's tenure was a wild, drunken party in Eugene, 2016 would prove to be their nasty hangover. Pac-12 teams took turns getting their years-in-the-making revenge, the worst case of it enacted by Washington, who beat them 70-21. To cap things off, they suffered their first Civil War loss to rival Oregon State in nearly a decade, as OSU back Ryan Nall pounded it home in the driving rain to put an end to Helfrich's miserable season. The alumni, Phil Knight, and the boosters were stunned. This couldn't be happening. They were elite. They were an elite team. Helfrich was unceremoniously canned after the Civil War. Phil Knight decided to throw money at the problem, as he does. He hired Willie Taggart, who was a big talker from Florida. He promised a return to Chip Kelly days. Let's see, the best way to describe Willie Taggart. The man was like a used car salesman. There was just a general sense of fakiness when he talked. He had that smile on his face, and you could kind of tell he didn't really believe the words he was saying. Just a weird dude. His new catchphrase for the team was "do something," which was widely mocked for its unintended vagueness. And as a side note, "do something" is it's the Poe's law of team slogans. Nothing can be that dumb. It's the bottom of the barrel of slogans. Hey coach, we're losing, what should I do? Something. You got it, coach. Willie Taggart had made statements about joining the team, stating that he wanted to be the first African American to win the national championship, things like that. He was desperate for a shot at it, and everyone bought in. It seemed like Willie saw Oregon as his opportunity, sort of the car he would ride to the big game. So he came up with more slogans, more hashtags, huge recruiting hype. And one thing about Willie, he was very good at recruiting. He can hype something up like nobody's business. He built up a #1 recruiting class that year. However, the first thing he did to the team was put players in the hospital after training programs. It seems he overworked them and they got a weird blood condition. I'm not really sure about the details. Coaches got arrested. One player was dismissed after crashing into a McDonald's at midnight. It just seemed like a mountain of bad news coming out of Autzen that summer. During that year, the team was average at best, but they had zero depth when Herbert was gone, Justin Herbert being their quarterback. Herbert is, I think he's still their quarterback. Herbert is average. He's an okay quarterback. But this brings me to a point I meant to cover earlier in the video. The local press in Eugene, they have sort of a weird delusional optimism about the Ducks. They always think they're right on the verge of getting back into the big one, guys. And this leads to what I call the Harrington effect. When the team is garbage, and you have one okay player, by comparison, he looks like Heisman material. This guy is leading the college football world. The thing about that is, nobody outside of the state really cares, because it's obvious he's just an okay player. So as a result, the team kind of feels like, oh man, we don't get no respect from the national media. Well, it's because you're not that good. Anyway, with the end of the regular season, they looked on it as a rebuilding year, of course. So next season, it's going to be even better. Willie Taggart's he's really going to bring us back into prominence. That did not happen. Willie Taggart basically fleeced the team. He used Oregon as a launching pad to get into a better job. In the last few weeks of the regular season, Florida State came knocking with an offer. Willie Taggart, talking to the media, insisted that, he would never leave Eugene. This is his dream job, you guys. But after that last game of the season, he basically took off in the middle of the night. He was gone. He had used Oregon as a stepping stone, and Oregon was not happy about this. He left right before the Las Vegas Bowl, which was it's one of those low-tier bowl games that the OK teams play in. But still, it was kind of an insult for him to just take off before that. People were stunned. Panic set in amongst the boosters. The fans were uncertain about what was going on. Nobody had any idea what to do. Willie's #1 recruiting class, a lot of them followed him to Florida, so they even lost that. Some players even sat out the Las Vegas Bowl, notably Royce Freeman, who didn't want to play to protect himself for the NFL draft or something. It was kind of a selfish move, frankly. In the Las Vegas Bowl, a familiar face, Boise State, popped up again. They dismantled the Ducks. In the weeks following, the coaching search began. The fans want Chip Kelly back. Kelly was busy with the NFL at the time, where he was meeting with, let's just say, lackluster results. His system was practically useless in the professional league. I think he's returning to college football this year, coaching a California team, UCLA. He's coaching UCLA. Meanwhile, the players on the team petitioned to get Mario Cristobal, the interim head coach, hired permanently to just maintain some shred of stability. So the question on everyone's mind now is, can Mario fix things? Well, I mean, they still have an actual throne in their locker room, so there may be some ego issues to work out there. Anyway, I think the lesson of this story, the moral, you cannot buy success, you can't shortcut your way to the top. That's really all I'm saying, folks. This upcoming season should be interesting because the press and their delusional optimism, they seem pretty convinced that Mario, or Super Mario as he's been nicknamed, is gonna be the next Chip Kelly, and Justin Herbert's gonna win a Heisman Trophy, and it's kind of sad. It's really kind of sad. I plan to start streaming soon on Twitch on this subject and maybe some other stuff. I don't know. So if you wanna see that, you can catch me there. I'll be under the username Jack East River, all one word, I think. So that should be fun, and I'll probably upload those to the channel, I guess. So yeah, catch you later. It's been fun. Have a good day. Don't take any wooden nickels.